Distribution provided by Cloud Sigma, the cloud that adapts to you. Visit cloudsigma.com/thisweekin for a free $200 credit.
Today's episode of This Week in Web Design is brought to you by Full Sail University, offering immersive, fast-paced degree programs both on campus and online, designed for the needs of today's technology media industry. For more information, visit fullsail.edu/thisweekin. Today, how do I use responsive web design? Ari and I will be talking to developer Chris Vince from Full Sail University about creating responsive websites. You've been asking for this episode. A lot of people have been asking me for this, so stick around and watch us work. Bienvenidos al episodio número 44 de esta semana para Diseño para la Red. I am your host, Jose Caballero, Chief Education Officer of the Skool. Joining me as always, and this time over the interwebs on GoToMeeting, is Ari Guimon. Welcome,
Hey,
Ari.
everybody.
How are you doing?
Thank you.
Wow, you're
Good, man. How are you?
You're really big. You can actually back up a little bit before you break into the computer. There you go.
There you go.
Thank you. And joining us from Orlando, Chris Vince from Full Sail University. Welcome, Chris.
Good. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for taking the time on being here today and helping us with this topic. We're going to answer the following three questions. One, what is responsive web design, for those of you who might be asking that question? Number two, when should I use responsive web design? In what situations should I use it? And number three, hey, Chris, can you show us how to make a site a responsive site, or my site responsive? And again, we're not another video tutorial show. We're going to get to the tutorial in a second here in a minute, but think of us more of the daily show for web designers. We are going to talk a little bit at the beginning about the basics and the overview. If you want tutorials and you want to right away, some of the places you can go to, like Team Treehouse, lynda.com, How Interactive University, all those links are below, but more importantly, even Full Sail, which is a great resource for what you're about to learn today. So, Chris, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do?
Sure. Actually, I'm a course director here at Full Sail University. I do the front-end development, so HTML, CSS, and I teach on campus and online.
Awesome. So one of the things that, the first off the bat, the people have been asking, I think the biggest question that is on everyone's mind, and, the difference between responsive and mobile sites, et cetera. What the heck is responsive web design?
Well, simply put, it's just CSS techniques to make your site respond to the user's different screen size.
Awesome. So it's really basically a way for the site to change format into the different varying sizes, from phone to tablet to different things, which is something that's happening a lot with websites today with the there's a lot of damn devices. Now we have an iMac, or not an iMac, iPad Mini. Yeah, there. Thank you very much. Michelle's bringing it up here on the prompter. Can't believe I forgot that. So, well, who created? How did this come up? Who created responsive web design?
Basically, a guy named Ethan Marcotte, I think I pronounced that right, who actually wrote the book Responsive Web Design for a Book of Parts series, and he actually created the article about responsive web design that kind of started it all on a List of Parts website.
So if people are not aware, again, it's a very great book series on web design called A List Apart. So A List Apart. I won't bring it up on my screen, but you guys can Google that. It's a very, very, very good series. And this is, so Ethan Marcotte, he literally wrote the book on responsive web design through articles on the blog on the List Apart. So again, let's go a little deeper. So what's the difference between responsive and mobile? Like, are they different?
Yeah, absolutely. Responsive is not a separate website. You're basically keeping everything as far as the HTML the same, and then the CSS is doing, all the changes, and it's responding to the different devices. So if somebody has, say, like an iPad, it's going to look different than if it's on your iPhone.
Which one's going to be
and of course, the desktop version is going to be different as well. And it even will change if someone, say someone has an iPhone and they are looking at it sideways, landscape, versus if they look at it up and down, portrait. You can make your site respond to that and display content differently and to make use of the space, basically. and it's just a way to have content that maybe someone that's just on their iPhone and are quickly trying to look up something, they can find the information that they need and not have to zoom way in or get a bunch of information they don't need.
Right, so the good old pinch and zoom to see content. Ari, you do a lot of mobile work right now. You know, can you give us a little bit of your point of view on the differences between mobile and responsive?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think when you work on, how can I say that? Like, mobile is one of the components of responsive web design, like, you know, reducing it down to the size that you can see it comfortably on the phone. I think for me, the big difference is that I've gone from working with absolute values or values that don't change, and that's in terms of both design and CSS, to values that are relative. So instead of using pixel widths, I'll think more in terms of percentages these days, so that no matter what you're viewing things on, it still sort of displays accurately. Like, the proportions are still accurate.
So you said something really interesting there, and you got a little fussy there through the interwebs, like, but that's okay. We caught the gist of that. That you said that there's relative values versus absolute values, which, you know, if you're not a developer, what that means is that, you know, before you would put 100 pixels wide as an absolute value, designating a particular space or module within the design, and now you're actually just putting percentages, so things are going to vary. So one of the things that you really need to, as a designer and as a developer, but very specifically for the designers out there, you need to look at your content and how you're creating content as a variable system that is going to change, and understand what responsive web design is in order to be able to adapt to it in your thinking process as you're communicating with a developer. But let's move on. When should I use it? That's a really big question. So at a business level or at a decision-making level, should we make every single website responsive, or when is a good thing? Chris?
Well, it kind of depends on the client, I guess, as usual. It really just depends individually. You know, if they have the budget to make an individual mobile site versus if they don't, then maybe responsive would be, you know, the perfect solution for them. Because again, the page doesn't have to change. The markup doesn't change at all. It's just the CSS. And in fact, you're just adding more CSS to your existing style sheet. So that would be, you know, one example. You know, if it's budget, if depending on the target audience, if they know that a lot of people are going to be viewing their site on multiple devices, you know, different mobile devices, and there's just so many of them out there now. You know, when you take into account Android smartphones and tablets, and of course iPhones and iPads, but even like Nooks, things like that, Kindle Fires. So if that's going to be the target audience, then, you know, responsive web design might be the perfect solution, because the thing with mobile, you have a mobile site, it's specifically just going to be made for, you know, one mobile site that's kind of supposed to work for all different devices, and that's going to be really hard to do with all the different resolutions and screen sizes. So that's when responsive really is.
Yeah, it really becomes valuable when you do have that huge amount of variability. And you said it really well, that it depends on the client's budgets and on the client's intent. From a business stakeholder point of view, obviously, you know, that's a really huge challenge when it comes to making those decisions. But if it's a content site, it sounds like it's likely easier or better to, or it's better to from the beginning to make it responsive. If we talked about this in our conversation a few days ago, that we said, you know, if you're doing a banking website, you know, you probably want to do an app, and if you have a mobile version of that, you probably want to do its own mobile, because there's a lot of data that's coming into that, and reformatting is going to be a big deal. But if it's mainly content, or if it's a simpler type of site, you know, banking is a very specific instance, you might actually have that ability to, or you might want to make it responsive. So, you know, this is what people really want to see. They want to see us do it. So can you show us how to make, you know, my site responsive? Like, what are the things that I need to do? You know, switch to your screen and tell us what are the important things. You know, you said that a solid understanding of CSS is important. Obviously, a calculator. You know, can you show us that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. And this is probably the best way to show you it is actually an example site that web page that I created really quickly. And actually, there's a couple ways that you can show it. First way is if you just kind of drag the bottom of the browser and kind of see when it gets to a certain size, some things are going to change. I'll kind of point it out. You know, right here, the 3 columns now turn to 2 columns. If I go a little smaller, you notice that this actual this is kind of a pull quote that it's on the side, just disappears, and then we just go to single column for smaller screens. And actually, another good way to kind of show that is the web developer toolbar from Chris Predrick. He added this pretty recently under resize. You can actually view responsive layouts, and this is a great way to see. And if we kind of do the same thing and scroll all the way down, you can see exactly what this site looks like. Tablet landscape is actually going to look exactly the same as the desktop, but as soon as we scroll up a little bit, this is where we get the 2-column for a tablet portrait. So again, think of someone with an iPad.
That's really cool. How do I find that responsive layouts tool?
It's actually just under resize if you have the web developer add-on. If you don't have it, easy enough to get. You just can actually go under tools and then add-ons right inside of Firefox. It's a Firefox extension. It's this one, the web developer add-on, but you could actually just search web developer, and more than likely it's going to be one of the top ones that comes up. But it's the one that's mine doesn't show up because I already have it. But Chris Predrick, it's a really popular, really useful for all kinds of things, but definitely for just visually seeing what this site is going to actually look like. On here I've got a small tablet. You can see that it's got the 2-column, and then all the way to where it's a single column, and I got rid of that whole pull quote where you've got small tablet portrait, or then we're getting into like smartphones with like a mobile landscape, or even a mobile portrait, and and see exactly what it looks like. And literally, if I looked at this on my iPhone, it looks exactly like this, and I could scroll back and forth with my with my finger and see how that works. So that's kind of a simplified version, but just showing basics of like you got a 3-column layout. Now you can change to a 2-column maybe on an iPad, and then go down to a 1-column when you're with an iPhone.
That's pretty awesome. So that tool really does give you a really great amount of visibility quickly. You don't have to be sitting there resizing your screen as you're developing. You're able to make changes. So talking about developing, can you show us a little bit, some of the basics? I know you need a calculator and you need to do a little bit of math here. So somebody like me who's flaky, obnoxious, might not actually have the ability to do that. But for those of you out there who are inclined to, can you show us how you do that?
Yeah, and it's actually not that difficult. I mean, once you get the formula down, it's you're just going to be using it over and over.
What is the formula, by the way?
Actually, the formula is simple. It's target divided by context equals the result, and that might sound complicated, but I'll show you the examples. You're really just when you're going to be changing a few things like the font size and widths, and we'll see how that works. But you're basically just dividing it by its context and then getting the result. So this is just kind of showing the markup real quick, the HTML, kind of your basic, some divs, some IDs, some structural elements. And this is just the basic CSS with no responsive. So I just have kind of your typical like font size. I have it 16 pixels. I've changed font size for a heading. I got some widths, some floats. So you still want to have a pretty solid understanding of CSS, but this is, most sites will have something similar to this. And the first thing really you want to do is change the font. So the font size is actually the first step. And what you're basically doing is you're changing things from pixels, kind of like we were just talking about, to relative value. In fact, M's would be the relative value that we'd prefer for font size. So
what's an M, by the way? That's a typographic terminology that I haven't seen before in coding.
Yeah, it does. It comes from typography and in the print world. But basically, it's relative to, for web design, 16 pixels is what just about all browsers have as their default
font size.
Font size. So yeah, so a 1M is going to be almost like what we do with 100%.
Got it. So basically, it's a representation of the standard unit. If the standard unit is 16 pixels, 1M means 16 pixels.
Exactly. And say like with this heading level 2, I wanted it to be 26 pixels. So literally, I'm going to divide 26, and that's going to be, again, we're getting that formula, but that's the target.
Oh, so your basically your ideal, what you actually want it to be, your target is actually being divided by the mean or by the average of what the is that it? Is that what am I understanding that right?
Yeah, that's the context. So the context is, 1M is 16 pixels. So literally 26 divided by 16. And I'll even show you how to do that with, I'll just get a handy dandy Google Calendar or Google online calculator, and just getting that number. And again, it's just taking that exact number, the 26, dividing it by 16, and I'll show you how easy that is. As long as I get this right. 26 by 16, there we go. Divided by 16, and then equals, and then I'm going to get this number, the 1.625. And that's literally the number that I would copy and paste into my CSS. So that's it. That's exactly where I got this 1.625, and then it's an M. So
I get it. So basically, it's an issue of the multiplication that is occurring, or you're telling the font size to be 1.2. So, but what I'm not understanding is how does that manifest itself in variability? I mean, is the font going to change size?
It depends on the resolution and the screen size. So when you think of like mobile devices, especially now with the high definition and Retina displays and everything. Something that's 16 pixels, just the width of that could look completely different on my screen versus maybe on another screen. So it's going to keep it relative. So, the sizes of the fonts aren't going to get completely out of whack depending on the different.
Is it keeping it relative to bit depth? So basically, if I have a Retina display, I have obviously a much higher pixel density, and is that going to affect the variability?
Well, and that's the thing too, is that the browsers for those devices are going to take that into account, and they're still going to take a 16 pixel as the browser default. But yes, I mean it's going to look a little different on these different screen sizes. So if we didn't make them relative and make them these M values, then it would completely look different, or potentially look completely different if it's say 26 pixels on my screen versus 26 pixels on another screen. So this is just kind of evening the playing field. So everything is going to be it's going to be M, so it's going to be relative. So
that's interesting. So let me summarize a little bit that concept briefly. So the putting in M as the value, and of course the formula after that, and you already did the calculation for the formula there. It's the browser is interpreting the EM as, oh, this is a variable, and I'm going to vary it. Is that correct?
Yeah. So even if for whatever reason a browser's got a completely different size that it considers the default 1M, you're still just going to be 1.625 M.
Of that 1M, yeah. So if you already made your default smaller, it's going to vary to that. But that's your issue when you do it. Cool. Well, keep on going. This is very fascinating, by the way.
And it's just basically the same thing. Like down here, I've got, I wanted to have the font size to be 24 pixels for that, the pull quote. So same thing, you just divide 24 by 16, and I got 1.5 M. And it's not going to look any different. I think that's one thing that gets some confusion, I know, with students, is they'll convert their font sizes and they'll say, hey, it looks exactly the same on my screen. And that's the point. It's supposed to look exactly the same because, again, we're just using the browser default. If it looked any different, that's when you knew that something has gone wrong. Or you've done your math wrong or put a decimal in the wrong place. But yeah, everything should actually look exactly the same on pretty much any browser. But if you do go and look at it on an iPad or an iPhone, it might look, slightly different. But the idea is keeping it relative. So, the headings are still going to be larger than the body copy, and say like this pull quote is still going to look bigger. So yeah, it's all relative. And this actually has been around for a while. We used to have to actually use M's before with Internet Explorer 6 and below, because if users wanted to actually go in and change the font size, other browsers, they could go in and change font size, bigger or smaller, but Internet Explorer you couldn't. So you couldn't if you had a pixel value. You had to use them. So
got it. So that was an issue when you were doing QA for older sites. So now we're basically in a newer generation of sites, or a browser, sorry. And then what's happening is we're beginning to use the existing conventions already within HTML5 to develop, or even in HTML4, I'm going to assume that was available. And it's really in order to begin dealing, basically responsive web design is a response, no pun intended, or actually pun intended, to the proliferation proliferation. God dang it, I can't pronounce that. For the rapid increase of other devices, of tablets and of mobile devices in a bunch of different sizes. So keep on going through that. How do I deal with columns? How would I like tell my code to kind of say, hey, drop the column to the next one?
Yeah, well, actually, I did that with the column count, which is a relatively new CSS3 property. But right now you see that its column count is at 3, so there's 3 columns for these paragraphs down here. Actually, one other important thing, too, is since these guys are floating, I have to have their widths be converted, and then if there's any padding or margin that's left and right, has to be converted, too. So kind of following along with that, the widths would be the next thing that I would change, just so things could be responsive and could change the layout. But and that's kind of where we start with, like right here, I've got a wrapper division, so that's just a division that's containing the whole site. And this is kind of the big step. Is the first thing I did is instead of just doing a width of 960, I made it a maximum width. And that's important too, because that's basically saying I don't want to always have the width of 960. It can be smaller because some devices are going to have smaller widths, obviously, but I don't want it to ever get bigger than 960. So if someone has a huge monitor, my site's still going to be centered at 960, and everything's going to work the way that I want.
Interesting. I like that.
And then it's really the same idea, but now we're converting widths. And say like here, this aside was 500 pixels. So it's the same formula. I'm still going in there and trying to find the target, which is going to be my 500 pixels, and dividing it by the context. But now the context is, well, what's the size of the container?
Oh, got it. So it's not what the size of the average font on a browser size, the default, and now it's what I want as a broadest canvas, quote unquote, or container.
Yeah. And this
cool.
is, and again, doing it relative by doing a percentage is going to make it so even if it is a small screen, it's still only going to be like for this 52%, 52.83. And this is where the numbers aren't as pretty as, we saw before.
It gets fancier, yeah.
So it potentially could be a little more confusing, but I mean the same thing. Like if I knew this is 500 pixels and I wanted to convert it to a percentage, and that's what we do. Instead of using M's, we use percentages for any widths and padding and margin that are horizontal. So we'd say 500 pixels divided by 960, and if I can get back here, same idea. I mean, we just basically go in here and out of there, do 500 divided by 960. Now when I get that, I get this long number. And you do want to put all these numbers in. I know a lot of students will why don't we just round it up? And the reason why is because this is, browsers will understand this number. They don't have any problem with it. So you want to put in all the numbers, even though it does look kind of maybe scary at first. And the other thing is you want to make sure that you put the decimal point in there. So if you look at here, it's 0.520833333.
Interesting.
So just got to make sure you put the decimal, because we are talking about percentages. So, and again, this is something like if you didn't put it in.
That's a little detail right there. I would have probably not caught that. So basically, it's trying to make it 52% versus the numeric 0.52.
Yeah, exactly. So since it's a percentage, you have to put the decimals in, and again, leave the numbers in. Long numbers, the browsers will understand it, and they'll, it'll actually
6666666, and then you. Ari, let me, out of curiosity, ask you a question. I mean, how's this looking to you? Give me your commentary.
I think this is great. I mean, I love the formula, because you can very easily then go through something that's been coded the old way, just pull out a calculator and sort of like just change things to make it adapt to the way things are going to be moving forward, And I think the great thing about this is that it's sort of it's adapting to what's happening out there. Like 5-10 years ago, like everybody used to view your website or your content on the same type of device, like a monitor or something. And this is, and you just said it, right? Like the iPad mini just launched, and then before that it's the iPhone 5, and you've got all these Android devices out there. So.
But I'm talking more out of when you were coding point of view. I mean, is this complicated, or does this look like it's simple enough?
No, that's exactly my point. That's what I was saying earlier, that it's exactly what I used to do but it's just got this formula. And that's the fascinating thing about seeing the formula is I could potentially go back into a lot of the things that I coded maybe 3-4 years ago when I was doing more of the front end dev, and just pull out a calculator and start adjusting the values, fonts from pixels to ems, and widths from pixels to percentages, like we're seeing here.
Is that easy, Chris? I mean, could I go back to what I coded last year and begin doing that?
Yeah. I mean, there's one other step to it, but that's.
What's the other step?
Something that anybody could go in and do. And that's the thing, with widths, and then if there's margins that are left or right, or padding that's left or right, you can go in there and
what's the other step, Chris?
The last step is the media queries, and that's kind of the new concept. That's the new thing that's the CSS3, and that's what actually lets you go in and target individual sizes, and that's kind of the power, I guess, of this, is that you can go in and now completely change your layout depending on what screen sizes you have. Before, we were just kind of making everything relative to it would look the same depending on different browser sizes, but now we actually can change it. So, and it's still basically it's nothing that's too complicated. I mean, the biggest thing, if we go back to our markup, and this is the only markup we really have to change or add, is this meta element, and all this is doing is just telling any mobile device that it should just do the normal default 100% scale for viewing your site. So it doesn't try to do any kind of so you're basically the one in control of what's the
Got it. So instead of, for example, when you're in the Safari browser on an iPhone, on an iDevice, instead of that browser saying, oh, this is a big-ass website, let me shrink it all down so that it fits on the screen, it's telling it, no, don't do that. Just leave it 100% what it would have been in a regular browser, because it's going to adjust itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Step off, basically.
Yeah, because you know what you're doing is what you're basically telling it.
That's awesome. So once I put that into the code of my page, then basically now the variability takes over.
Yeah, and that's where these media queries, that's where they can actually work now, and the power kind of comes in. And as you can see, it looks a little different if you've never done it, but all we're basically doing is saying that for a certain screen size, this is the CSS we want to apply to it. And just like I've shown here, this is from bigger to smaller, and it literally, like right here, I'm just changing the column count. So you asked about that. I mean, literally, that's one line of CSS that I've said, okay, well, now let's make the column count from 3 to 2. And this would be for a tablet that's portrait. And again, if you go back and look at it visually, I mean, that's where we were right here, where we have tablet portrait, and right down here is where we have the 2 columns now. So that's it. I mean,
so the media query is really relative to the columns in that case scenario, in that one right there.
Yeah, and it's literally just saying that from this size, from this minimum width to this maximum width, this is the CSS I want to apply to it.
Got it. So basically, when you get that small, just switch to 2 columns, and then you have another one when it says you get a lot smaller, switch to 1 column.
Yeah. Go to 1 column, and then there's a little bit more to it, like floats. I basically turn off the floats, so things will just stack up naturally. Keep everything 100% width, and this is where that full quote was in the aside. That's where I just said display none, and it's because it's not absolutely essential. So I just basically said, well, you know what? In a smaller screen, just let's not even bother. Let's just not even display it. And then have a 1 column for all those paragraphs. And that's why, when we go up to this smaller screen size like this with a small tablet portrait, that content's not even shown. And that's assuming that's just, some basic, like a pull quote from an article, to catch your eye, but it's not absolutely essential. And if I am on a small tablet held portrait, I don't even need that. I can just keep everything, it's not cluttering up the screen real estate. So kept everything in 1 column, and even down to the smaller size like mobile landscapes and the mobile portrait. Same thing. Everything is just nice and neat, single column, and that's what I have at this bottom where we've got right here. And I just happen to have the same CSS, but you could go in and do all kinds of different changes. I mean,
obviously, yeah, you can give it a lot more control. So let me see if I understand this part correctly. So we already talked about how fonts change. Now we're talking about using the column component in CSS to switch the count from 3 to 2 to 1. Of course, other things like, float and, different components can be, modified here at this level with the CSS. So in a way, the majority of the issues relative to making the site almost 100% of what you need to do, let's say call it 95 maybe, is in the CSS.
Yeah. I mean, the CSS is really doing all the work.
It's doing all the work. So that's really fascinating. Let me ask you this. So as we start to wrap up, what would I expect if, as a student going to Full Sail, again, for our viewers who are viewing this, Chris is doing this because he's awesome and he's helping us deliver that to you that you've been asking. But Full Sail also happens to help us pay the bills as being one of our awesome sponsors. But from your point of view, Chris, I'm curious, what is your commitment to the students, that go through the Full Sail program?
Well, I mean, it's something I've been doing for years now, and I really kind of enjoy seeing the progression of students that kind of come in, and a lot of them have had no coding at all. Like, they have no experience at all, especially in my class, because it's the fundamental HTML and CSS, and then kind of see them, and they'll struggle sometimes.
Can you do me a favor, Chris? Can you switch back, turn off screen sharing, and just go back? Just turn off screen sharing so that we don't see your screen. There you go. So I'm sorry, I cut you off. So you're saying that there's students who come in that don't have somebody like me who might not have any code experience. If I come in, and would be like what we just did right now, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I mean, it's really. We see them just starting out and not having any experience, and then seeing what they can do even just in a month, because just the way that Full Sail is, we're so accelerated that, within literally 4 weeks, I can see a drastic change, and you can kind of see the light bulb go off. That's like, oh, okay, I understand this now, and I can make, web pages, and all this stuff seemed like it was this crazy technology and magic, and then when they actually see what it is and what they can do with it, it's exciting to see that and seeing that progression, and especially when I see students that move on and start doing some of the the JavaScript and some of the server-side languages, and some pretty complicated.
Well, I feel that I already learned a ton just from this 20 minutes that we spent together, and almost if I went and started learning again, I know fundamentals of coding, but I'm more a designer than I am a developer. But I feel like I could learn very quickly within a matter of weeks some of the basics, and of course going through the program to earn a degree. Actually, I'm in Orlando next month or in December, so maybe I'll stop by and you can teach me, continue teaching me responsive design. That's a joke, but I am in Orlando. And a curiosity, because I know also that that Jesse, you have multiple degrees. You can study something like web design, which is what we teach here, and development and mobile application development and internet marketing, which is a fascinating one for me. That's what I would probably study if I went to Full Sail. But Jesse, what was it that you studied, Jesse, at Full Sail?
I studied show production and touring. So
show production and touring, and here you are doing show production. Maybe you can help me with my tour next year that I want to do of the Midwest and of the middle of America. So Chris, our TriCaster operator, and the person who makes the magic happen here with our team under the bold leadership of Brandis Payne, actually is a Full Sail graduate. So we're benefiting from the awesomeness that you guys provide. And I want to say thank you for sponsor us and for being a partner. More than a sponsorship, it's really a partnership, and really helping people figure out their web design careers and having really great opportunities, to go into a fast-paced program that's very immersive. And the final thing that Ari and I always love is this, Project Launchbox program where you get a MacBook Pro right at the beginning. So that's kind of nice. That's a good way to start.
Yeah, definitely.
So thank you again, Chris. I really appreciate you taking the time and joining us to help with responsive design. And let me know in the comments, guys, how valuable the responsive design. I spent a little bit longer for those of you who sometimes feel that I cut things off. But if you want more, talk to Chris, talk to us, go to fullsail.edu/thisweekend. If you're considering a career in web design, I really urge you to do that. Ari, thank you for joining us for the commentary. I'm going to have a few housekeeping announcements here as we wrap up today's very special show. And I also want to thank Media Temple for sponsoring our websites, the Skool, This Week in Web Design, and helping us out. I've been really touring and speaking very frequently and taking Media Temple with me. And also, if you guys join the Skool sessions, which I would really encourage you, if you're figuring out the business of web design and struggling with either your freelance practice or your agency, if you're a producer or a designer at an agency, to join us every week live on the Skool Live. And I don't know if we have a title card for that or not, but we might. Very, very importantly, there we go, the Skool Live every Thursday. And no, a puppet does not teach it. It's actually live with me. And then we're beginning to introduce new teachers over the next few weeks, over the next few months, and into the spring. Also, there's a free webinar that we're going to be doing, Simple Tools for Managing Complex Projects. Simple Tools for Managing Complex Projects. One of the biggest things people tell me is this, that is very complicated. And November 8th, 1 hour free webinar, and I urge you to take it if you're looking for simple tools to manage complex web projects. I also want to thank our team. If you can bring that up, our title card right here. This is everybody who makes the show possible. Jesse Mills right there, TriCaster Superhero. You should actually put Full Sail Graduate. That would really help. You can join us live every week, 2:30 p.m. 2:30 Pacific, and 5:30 Eastern. Don't forget to like us on Facebook. Like us on Facebook. All the stuff is below in the comments. There's a bunch of resources for you in the comments, including more resources for responsive web design that Chris got for us. You have links to a list apart, to Smashing Magazine, and other publications and resources for you to do that. Again, the Twitters, follow Ari on Twitter. Make sure that you check out fullsail.edu/thisweekend and find out more about what the possibilities are. This is actually, again, by far the most important thing you can do to help support the show, those of you who benefit from the show. And I know you guys do because you tell me on email and on the YouTubes and on the Googles. All right, so thank you guys. Thank you again to Full Sail. I really look forward to next week. Next week, we're going to be talking about WordPress again, how to deliver files to a developer with the developer we've been working on the This Weekend Network website. And Chris, are you able to come on again and do some other topics with us?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. I had a good time. So yeah.
I would love that. So again, if you're watching this and you're like, Jose, can you give us some more technical stuff? We're tired of watching you and Ari talk bull duty, and you want more tech. For the dorky people in our audience, request stuff, and I'll have Chris come back and we can do more tutorials for you. In the meantime, tune in next week when you watch us work.